Moving on, let's get into this week's big question. So, with the confirmed signing of Japanese centre-half Yuki Kobayashi and the imminent arrival of Canadian right-back Alastair Johnston, has Ange Postecoglou identified the improvement of the defence as a priority at this stage? James, your initial thoughts on that suggestion, and do you think Ange has been concerned about what he's been seen defensively thus far?
It's strength and depth. Well, it's two things. It's strength and depth for centre-half, and this is what we're going to see if someone puts their head above the parapet and isn't shown for Ange the way he needs to be. If you're gone, you're gone. And that's it. And we've seen it in Juranovic's performances all year. So it's two different things for two different positions there. I think he's seen strength and depth at centre-half isn't strong enough. And if we want to compete at the highest level, and he very much does, and we very much do, then I think he's finding Welsh isn't kind of coming up to the line. So, like I said earlier on, very disappointing for Welsh if that does turn out to be the case. But football's a tough game. So I think we'll then have those four strong centre-halves. Juranovic, I think it's really interesting that, just that if someone has put their head up and said, I'm looking for a move, you're gone. Off you go and get that number and you're away. Whilst at the same time, they're really working hard to get that replacement. We don't know much about Johnston, but from what we've seen, it looks decent. So if they can get that business done, that is as clean as you like. And then I think there's more to be done further up the pitch.
Yeah, I think the suggestion is that they've had the conversation with Juranovic and his agent, and he's not been willing to sign the new deal. And I think Celtic are, as you say, they're being very smart, very proactive, because if he doesn't want to sign the new deal, that's absolutely his prerogative and that's fine. But Celtic need to say, okay, well what's next then? And they're clearly planning in the background. They're anticipating some offers coming in for Juranovic in January. And in the meantime,
it's already done.
Yeah, you might be right.
I think they've got it sorted.
And in the meantime, it looks, to all intents and purposes, that Alastair Johnston's a done deal. I mean, in addition to Kobayashi and Johnston, in recent windows, we've also brought in Bernabei, left back, Jenz, centre back, and you can maybe even include Siegrist in terms of, being part of what you're looking to do defensively. Brad, we all speak about Ange's attacking intent and how he approaches the game, but do these moves tell you that he's equally intent on shoring things up at the back?
I think there's a bit of that. Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I think with the Juranovic, I think he's not his hands forced, but I think the way he conducts himself and what he's saying is, if you want to go, you can go. So I think that's just a kind of like for like. So it's not necessarily strengthening, but he is a younger player than Juranovic. He's got quite a few appearances for Canada, I think. He's got 30 odd appearances for a 24-year-old. That's pretty decent. So, his stock's pretty decent. The guy, if and when we sign him, hopefully it's just a case of when. And Juranovic, we'll sign him for £3 million. We'll make some decent money on that, and we can use that to strengthen in other areas of the park. I think with the Kobayashi, I think it's more the type of player as opposed to what he's done in the game so far. Looking at YouTube clips and how he is as a player, he very much is a defender that plays in the front foot. And if you don't do that properly, you end up coming a cropper. Christopher Ayer was terrible at it. He used to dive in all the time and get done. Hopefully, there's players that do it properly, and it allows the whole team to play on the front foot. If I look at Jenz and Welsh, who we have at the minute, as our kind of players out with Carter Vickers and Starfelt, when they played, they don't have the confidence or the ability to play on the front foot the same way. So the whole team or the whole defence drops back 5 or 10 yards, and that makes it very, very difficult for McGregor, Hatate, O'Reilly in the middle of the park. And it was no more evident than Leipzig away, when we dropped back and we just gave them so much time in our half actually to pick passes out and give players like that time to pick these passes out. They'll beat us. So I think we're looking at that, and I think it was a very, very obvious weakness that we had, that out with Carter Vickers and Starfelt, the other combination was pretty weak. So I think it's more the type of player as opposed to anything that people have done wrong or anything like that. I just think it's getting this young guy, and he's young as well, so and he doesn't cost a fortune. So
that's it. Well, what I'll do, I've got the fact file on Kobayashi and on Johnston, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I would like to just look at the bigger picture in terms of just some of the stats, which maybe highlight some issues defensively at this moment in time. So comparing where we're at just now with last season's numbers. So in the 2021-22 season, over the 38 games, Celtic scored 92 goals and conceded 22. So that was an average of 2.42 scored per game and 0.57 conceded. This season, we've obviously only played 15 games so far. We've scored 50, so we're doing okay there. That's an average of 3.33 goals per game. But we've conceded 13, which relates to 0.86 goals per game. So that's a number that is on the way up. I would caveat that with, you know what's coming. Four of those goals are penalties. 4 of those goals we've conceded are penalties that have been awarded against us since the introduction of VAR. Of those 4, I would say the 2 against Hearts probably are penalties.
Yeah,
don't have a big issue. The one against Dundee United, I'm not having. That's where Bernabe turned his back and got a penalty given against him. And the one against Ross County where it's hit Matt O'Reilly's hand.
Still not sure it was in the box.
Possibly outside the box. So you can bring all those factors into it, but at the end of the day, the table says we've conceded 13, and at this stage last season we'd conceded 10. Europe-wise, there's a similar thing going on. So Europa League last season, we played 6 games, obviously against lesser competition, you know, as we're all aware. We scored 13 goals in those 6 games, so an average of 2.17 goals a game, but we conceded 15 in 6 games. 15 in 6 games, so that's 2.5 goals a game. This season in the Champions League, so Real Madrid, Shakhtar, Leipzig, played 6, 4-4, so also not scoring enough, which we're well aware of, so an average of 0.67 goals scored. And again, the same number, 15 goals conceded, so that's 2.5 goals per game. I would also caveat that with the fact that 2 of Real Madrid's goals were VAR penalties, which you could seriously debate whether they should have been goals or not. But at the end of the day, we're losing, I would say, far more goals than even Ange would like to. You know, when Ange came in at first, people are saying, get used to 4-3 football and 6-2 and 5-2 and all this kind of stuff. That's fine. But if you want to really compete at the top level, not only do you need to have the attacking intent, which Jota, Kyogo, Haksabanovic bring, you need to close the door at the back. And I would say there's definitely a need for improvement there.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it, you know, long enough that the strikers win your games and defences win your titles. You know, you need to keep it tight at the back. I don't think it is something that Ange naturally falls to. I think he does prefer to, you know, make sure everything's going well up top, which I think both strikers have been in sticky form this year. I think they're both in better form now than they were in the early parts of the season. So if you're not doing up there, then you doubly need to be tight at the back. So, but as much as shoring up the back, it's being able to build from the back as well. You know, Kobayashi looks like the kind of guy that can come out, he can pick a pass, loves a diagonal. So that kind of thing is just as important to an Ange team as stopping the balls coming in. Yeah.
Aside from the stats and, you know, the numbers, Bridal, what's your own take on it, just anecdotally? Do you feel we're a wee bit weaker defensively this season, you know, conceding a couple more goals? You still think there's room for improvement there?
Yeah, there definitely is, but I think one big factor would be the change or the frequency of change in the back four, especially the centre half position. Carter Vickers missed a good few games, especially in Europe. Cal McGregor's not been there. You're putting Matt O'Reilly, who is one of our creative players, and we're putting him in North, and he's done okay, but defensively he's not as switched on as a Callum McGregor would be. Defensively, Greg Taylor's got better, so there is improvements there as well. I think when we've got our best 4 or 5 with the goalkeeper, the stats would probably be, or would reflect slightly differently. They're 2 big players, Carter Vickers and McGregor, to miss from a defensive unit point of view. I would also factor in the amount of missed chances and the pressure that then creates, and under pressure you concede more goals. So I think sorting that aspect out at the top of the park, if you go 2-0 up, you're less likely to concede if it's 1-0. It's bizarre. It's the same game, isn't it? But it happens all the time, just with that sheer pressure that, oh wait a minute, we could drop 2 points here, and it becomes nervous. So they've got to do their bit as well, and I think Ange would know that.
Yeah, and I think it's very fair to mention Carter Vickers missed a number of games. McGregor's been out since that Leipzig away game. That's going to have a huge impact. They're 2 of our best players, and there's no doubt that you're far better defensively and across the board with those 2 in mind. I mean, James, last season, you would certainly argue that the strongest back 4 would have been Juranovic, Carter Vickers and Starfelt with Taylor at left back. Very soon, we could be looking at Alastair Johnston as your right back. Carter Vickers remains. Kobayashi sits alongside him, and maybe Bernabe chapping the door, you know, on the left-hand side. So it's clear that, you know, as much as the back 4 were very much part of last season's success, Ange isn't resting, is he?
No, I do think Taylor retains his place. You know, Bernabe's improving and he's on his heels kind of thing, but
I would agree with you that it just didn't make that line as dramatic. I wanted to try and make it a bit of contrast. Yeah. But,
okay.
But carry on.
I'll let that go. But it's been able to swap all four of those out for four, and they're not necessarily to be deemed as second string. They're just who's playing this week, who's playing in Europe, who's playing next week, all that stuff. So Ange has been looking at improving the seconds since he got in. And we saw last season that the gap between first pick and second pick was so vast, and it's not now. The Johnston one's a wee bit different because that wouldn't have been a planned change. That's just that's shown really good reactions from the recruitment team that, that's happened, right? Well, remember that guy we were talking about? Let's start making moves for him. Get the number right for Juranovic, sign that guy, and we move. So I think credit for that as well. But yeah, I think consistency is a big thing for Ange, but he wants to see it not just from the guys who are playing week in, week out, but the guys come behind them as well. Yeah.
But just the way I think in a football sense is that I quite like when a goalie and a back four for the most part remain unchanged. I think you can build your team on that, and I don't like much chopping and changing in those areas. I'm all for the Celtic's front six changing at any given time, maybe with the exception of McGregor actually when he's back and fit, but I would rather my back four were pretty settled across the piece.
Yeah, and I think over the history of football, if you look at the most successful teams that we've seen across the world, they keep the back four the same. You could probably round them all off, from like the Arsenal back four, Man United's back four, Chelsea's back four, Celtic's back fours when we've been successful. It's like you could quite easily just rattle them. Like it's not difficult because they never changed. Mm-hmm. And I think we struggled under Lennon's his tenure. That I think we played something like 8 players at right back across that season, between the likes of Aya, Frimpong,
Moritz,
everything. That scrambling around in the dark trying to find a solution. Mm-hmm. That isn't how we do things now. On the right back coming in, I really hope that it's Ralston's jersey to lose, and I think that guy has not. Johnston's going to come in, and he's got to fight to take it off Ralston. I think Ralston deserves that right to say, no, this is my place, because he's not let us down. Mm-hmm. He really hasn't. I can't remember a time that he has let us down. In fact, he's done some big things for Celtic and big moments. So I hope he really gets a run of games to show that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I've got the fact file on both these players, albeit Alastair Johnston is not a Celtic player at this moment in time, so we can edit this out if this doesn't go accordingly.
Can we do one of David Girola as well?
Yeah. So we'll take a look at Alastair Johnston. First of all, James, he would be the second best Johnston to be part of Celtic's squad if he were to join the club. So he's currently with Montreal, who play their football in the MLS. He's 24 years of age and he's a right back, as we've discussed. You're absolutely bang on, Brido, in terms of his appearances for Canada. He's got 32 caps and 1 goal. And the fee is believed to be in the region of 3 million, of which I've read that he'll get 10% of it, which is nice. So there's 300 grand for your day's work. He's quoted as well, so he's obviously not confirming anything, but speaking just the other day at the World Cup, he said, "It's an honour just being linked with them. To be linked with a club like Celtic is obviously something I think every footballer is excited by. It's one of the most passionate fan bases in the world. It's a club that even people who don't follow football know who it is. I'm super excited to get linked to them, but right now the focus is just solely on the national team. Club things will get figured out once January hits." Kind of talking a bit street there, James, to be honest. Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable reading that at all. So once January hits, Brido, he's going to be our man. What do you think?
I'm not going to profess to know that I knew lots about him. As soon as we heard that there was a link there, all eyes turned to Canada games. Now, actually, Canada is one of the nations in this World Cup, are actually one of the better ones to watch. They've got Alphonso Davies, who's absolutely rapid on one side, and then Johnston and the boy Buchanan, I think, on the other side. Now, the games I have watched, the way Canada play, it kind of lets us see how this player's going to be in a Celtic-style team. Not exactly the same, but they certainly play on the front foot. They play with a high press, they play with high energy. And there was one moment in the game on Saturday night, maybe, or Sunday. I can't remember what night they were playing. Saturday, I think. He was about 40 yards or 30 yards behind the left winger who was breaking away. And he wasn't the fastest, but very, very quickly he caught up and he cut it off and stopped the attack. So he can certainly shift, that's for sure. And I think in a Celtic team that is an absolute must. But he didn't negate his defensive responsibility. He said, I'm going to make that ground up. And to be fair, he did that. So his passing, his distribution's pretty decent. His delivery into the box is pretty decent. So we've had a wee kind of snapshot of what he might be like in an Ange style team. Like Bernabe, he might have to come in and take time to adapt, just like Taylor and Ralston did as well. You know, they take time to adapt to what the manager's wanting them to do, which is completely different maybe to other club managers. So, but from what I've seen, he certainly looks that he could come in and add to our squad, that's for sure.
Yeah. James, relating to something Bridle mentioned earlier on, coming all the way from Canada is a long way to come to be Tony Ralston's understudy.
Well, if you look at, like Bridle says, what Ralston has done, the big moments, as well as just being steady. He's reliable and gives you the tank every single game. So there's a lot to be learned from Tony Ralston, particularly his journey from staring at maybe even being out of football to playing first team football for Celtic. So long way to come, a lot to learn.
Yeah. I think we've pretty much answered this question, Bridle, but whether it's Alastair Johnston or somebody else, does this move spell the end of Juranovic's time at Celtic?
I think so, and I think it's his choice. I don't think Celtic are getting rid of him because he's not been playing well or anything like that. I don't. It's
not been playing well because he's
that's it. That's exactly it. That's the motion first, and then the resulting factor has been that the World Cup was coming up, and you could quite clearly see, this is prior to the contract talk chat that we heard, it was as if something was distracting him, and it looked like, I'm not going for that tackle because I don't want to get injured for this World Cup, and it was really, really evident to anybody that was like looking for it, because we were trying to wonder why is this player regressed. He was a really good player the season before. He's one of our international players. He's experienced. He hit the ground running. He seemed to kind of get the club. He was a kind of favourite within the fans, and for whatever reason, he just, I don't know. And he's drifted away, and I think his mind's been made up probably in the summer. Actually, he's never really kicked a ball at all this season.
So he did the same at Legia, came in for the year. It's just time of life. Is he 27?
I think he's about that. Somebody said his head turns on a swivel. You know, the moment somebody shows interest, he was less than a year at Legia.
Yeah. I mean, you saw him talked about it last week, the Foundation Christmas party video and all that stuff. He's in it and he's having a great time and it's all that stuff. And it's not fake, but I think he's just thinking, I'm 27, I need to make some moves, and if these are the steps I'm taking, so he's Legia, he's Celtic, he's Champions League, he's Europa League, great exposure, and just sometimes that's the way football goes,
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's football, and his career is, generally speaking, been on an upward trajectory. And at 27, 28, if he feels he can get to La Liga with Atletico or somebody who's, in his opinion, a bigger club, then so be it. And the good thing is, Ange has primed us for this. This is exactly what he was speaking about when he spoke at the recent AGM. He basically said, we need to be aggressive in the transfer market, and that means, the terminology we used was saying goodbye to the current heroes. At some point, it'll be Juranovic, and it might be Jota, and it might be Kyogo. None of these guys are forever. That's just how football works. And I think what we can take comfort from is the fact that Juranovic goes, but the next Juranovic is waiting in the wings, whether it's Johnston or otherwise. And I think as much as he's been a great player for Celtic, you can make your peace with this if that's the strategy.
Yeah, I remember being much, much younger and players leaving, you're just devastated. I just don't feel that way. I think maybe the game has changed as well, where your expectations of players for life of the James Forrest, Cal McGregor kind of guys are few and far between. So yeah, I'm okay with it. Just
on that, just a kind of slight aside, do you remember the first Celtic player that broke your heart? Moving on, have you got anyone that jumps to mind?
Remember somebody that signed and didn't sign? That's got to be up there.
You going there?
Probably like McClare.
Yeah,
Brian McClare.
Do you know Miff says that? I think Miff was gutted when Brian McClare moved on. Anyone spring to mind for you, Brido?
I think the only one, not the only one, but just the end of Larson, man. That was like nothing.
That was different though.
It was but to me,
bittersweet. It
was just like, wow, right. How do we move on from this? Because we won't see a player at that level ever again. It's just the way the world is now, and certainly not for that time. We might get somebody just can wow us for a season or something, but when that happened, and then to score against us, I was like, oh man, you've got to be joking. It's like, what have I done to deserve this? But I think that nothing hurts worse than that for me.
Yeah, for me it was George Cadetti. I absolutely loved George Cadetti, and there was such an issue thanks SFA, and him joining the club in the first place and all the red tape and the nonsense that went on there. He obviously had that moment on his debut where he scored against Aberdeen and blew the roof off the place. And I think he stayed for one full season and a bit. He joined in April, seen out the rest of that season, played one full season and then he was off. And I was gutted. He was such a natural goal scorer, and our dad talks about how he was the most natural finisher since Frank McAvenny. He was an absolute goal machine. I think he gets something like 35, 36 goals, and then he was gone.
Yeah.
That was it.
Now he's your pal on LinkedIn.
That's correct. me and George are good buddies, but that's a completely different story. Yeah, on you go.
Mystery Celt.
Yes, James, after the buzzer.
Paducah.
No, it's not Dukes.
No need to
so don't need to buzz that one out. The answer has not yet been mentioned.
I've been tuned down the last 15 minutes.
I noticed.
Dialing it in here.
Yeah. In terms of Kobayashi, so just some of his figures. So as mentioned, he signed from VCL Kobe, Kyogo's old side, on a 5-year deal, free transfer. So very astute by Celtic being aware of that. I would suggest that's got to be a big part of Mark Lawwell's remit, James, and he's obviously doing some work there to identify these kind of players. 22 years of age, left-sided centre-half, which, quote-unquote from Ange, these guys are rare to come by. He's 6'1", he's got 5 caps for Japan under-20s, yet to play for the senior team. And he becomes Celtic's 5th Japanese player of the Postecoglou era and 7th overall after Nakamura and Koki Mizuno. Remember him? But certainly on paper, Bridle, it seems another exciting signing, and it fits the model of talented youngsters that Ange can develop. Yeah,
I think so. And we can't have anything but confidence in what they're doing at the minute because of what we've seen in the last 18 months. And especially from the players that are coming for the J League. They've hit the ground, not just hit the ground running, I mean, they've taken it to new levels. I thought Hatate got a bit of stick last year, but if you actually looked at it, he'd played a season and a half. And I think in that position, that's incredibly difficult to do. He got his rest, and then look at the difference we've seen. He's raised at another level, I think. So, one of our best players. So, this young guy might come in that position. It's more difficult for a younger player. They've got to come in and perhaps learn our game. But he can learn that from the likes of Starfelt and Carter Vickers and play when he needs to play. But we've seen Ange changing, the defence just to suit a certain game as well. So he might get more game than what I'm thinking, but it's great business anyway, I think.
Yeah.
I mentioned in an article actually that I put out last week about Ange signed 22 first team players, and there's a few that you would say haven't been a success, and that would be James McCarthy, Ideguchi, Liam Scales has gone out on loan to Aberdeen.
Aaron Moy.
Absolutely not Aaron Moy. And it remains to be seen where we're at with guys like Abelgard and Ben Siegrist. But, by and large, I think I've classed 16 of Ange's 22 signings to be a success. They've all played not just a notable part in what we've done last season and what we've done so far this season. And I think that's the point Bride was making. Whatever Ange is doing, in partnership with the recruitment team, you've kind of got to a point now where you just trust that they're making the right moves.
Yeah, and I suppose it stands in comparison to what we've done in the last 20/135 years, is to not invest in that side of the business and to take a lead a wee bit from scouts, and agents and things like that, rather than just being fully organised. First of all, the first thing it does is it stops you signing £2-3 million players that will never do anything for you, both in terms of performance and value. And that is the second part, is it lets you sign guys like Juranovic that you can sign for, £2.5 million?
Yep.
And punt for certainly no less than 10, probably nearer 15. So you make money, you save money, you get to enjoy the football while they're there. And it's been a long time coming, and I'm delighted to see it. Yeah.
I think the first thing Celtic's recruitment team have done is block Dudu Dahan's mobile number. So, for those who aren't familiar, he's the agent that brought...
did he not bring Abada? No.
Well, he did bring Abada, but he brought Beaton and Rami Gershon and a variety of other players to Celtic.
Weirdly, was it not? Somebody like
so, we'll take the Abada one as a real success, but that's enough from Dudu Dahan, because that just showed that at that time, Celtic very much had an agent-led approach. The agent would say, I've got these players, what one do you want to take off me this window? Now it's very much, we'll decide, using the technology available and the different systems, we'll go and identify the players that fit Ange's system and then bring them on board. In terms of Kobayashi, I was reading an interesting article that he says Thomas Vermaelen played an important part in his development, so ex-Arsenal and Barcelona defender, and he's been out there at the last couple of years. He's now retired, but last couple of years spent at Kobe, and he just brought his game on, and you can only learn from a guy like that as well.
Yeah, he was a really good defender. At one stage, he would be up there with the best defenders in the English Premier League. I think at one stage when Arsenal were doing okay, he seemed to just kind of, did he not just go away in a summer and then he was seen in another strip or something? Was that him?
Can't remember.
That's detail.
You've certainly gone off piste.
No, I think
just to remind you, I'm talking about Kobayashi as the main fit.
No, I know, but I was talking about Thomas Vermaelen. I'm sure he just disappeared this summer and then he fell out with something and he was seen with some French team strip or something. I might be completely wrong. If I am, then you can sack me tomorrow. But these young players will have to. It's good he's saying that. He's picking up things from experienced guys like that, whether they're playing or coaching. So he'll learn a lot at Celtic as well, and hopefully we'll get the best of him, or certainly the start of the best of him. And if he moves on, we'll make more money again. But it's not just about the money.
No, but it plays a part in the model, doesn't it? You know,
it builds and it's self-perpetuating. You know, it just keeps feeding.
Yeah, it's knowing where you are in the market. I think it's if you understand where you are in the market, then you'll know when and who to buy at what level. Probably more importantly, picking the right time to let them go. And I think that's possibly the most important part of the model we've got.
The one big thing that Lennon got right, and Lennon got castigated for his last season at Celtic, he was dead against keeping Edward and Ayer and various others, and it was Law that insisted on it. Never keep an unhappy player because it just spreads. It's toxic, you know.
Every player reaches a natural shelf life at any club, you know, at any stage, and I think that's the point. You've got to know. Celtic I think they now realise their place in the hierarchy, if you like, of the European game or the global game.
And you can move in that hierarchy. Obviously.
Absolutely. You can move up and down and stay rigid. Some fans get upset at the whole thing. We're not a selling club. We're not a stepping stone to the Premier League. Yes, we are, if you want to be real about it. You know, if somebody wants to come here at 22, Kobayashi, give us 2-3 brilliant seasons and go to Arsenal, that's fine with me. If he comes and gives us his best and we get a few quid at the end of it, he develops. Everybody wins out of that model, and that's just the modern game, and there's no point in getting upset about it. Listen, at times Real Madrid have to sell players, Barcelona have to sell players, and name any other club you want, Man United. It's just part of the world, and it's just a case of finding where you live within that structure and performing best as you can.
Yeah, you know, if you've seen the Ronaldo documentary, Ronaldo 9, last couple of
real Ronaldo.
The Ronaldo, the only Ronaldo. It's outstanding, by the way, as a documentary, but couldn't believe, or couldn't remember that he'd only spent 1 year at Barcelona, PSV, Barcelona, 1 year, and then off to Inter Milan. Mm-hmm. So are Barcelona a selling club? If they are, then we are.
Yeah, exactly that. So from Barcelona, Bathgate Juniors, we're all selling clubs. It's just part of the game. Just as we're wrapping up this section on the new recruits, Kobayashi and potentially Johnston, do you think both might slot right into the side, or do you think the fact that Ange's signing them in January will allow him to bed them in over the next 6 months or so before then stepping it up?
Yeah, I think you can see with Abelgard that Ange's model, and Bernabe, Ange's model is, you'll come in, you'll get some games, you'll get game time, but you won't be week in, week out. Last year was a wee bit different with the guys coming in January because we needed them. We absolutely needed them. It's less acute this year, but they'll be getting game time, they'll be bled into the system. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot of analysis to be done from the backroom team. So no, I think it'll be some and some. It won't be right, you're in, that's sure.
Yeah. Brido, final question on this section, but do you see Ange making any further additions from a defensive point of view, or do you think he'll be quite happy now with who he has in the building?
I don't think he will now. I think in the summer, I actually disagree. I actually think that he will. I don't think he'll take up the offer to sign Jenz. I don't think he'll sign Jenz. Time will tell, obviously. But so I think there would be another addition somewhere there if that's the case. Perhaps if he does go with him, then it stays the same, and that would be year 4. Left back, I think Bernabe will have a better kind of that second season syndrome where he'll have settled in to life in Scotland as much as playing for Celtic. And the right back, I think, when guys are coming from places like Canada and stuff, they'll probably settle in reasonably quickly, I think. Yeah.
I mean, James, just looking at it across the board, we now have, all going well with the new signings, 2 genuine contenders for every position across that back 4. Do you think Ange will be happy with that? Do you think that's him done defensively at this moment in time?
I think if you go beyond that, you start to get a bit bloated, and it does become hard to keep players happy. If we're rotating because there's a lot of games, there's an intensity of style, then you can keep those 8 players happy. If that becomes even 9, it becomes really difficult. Where you're looking for the next stage of that genesis, if you like, is not next year but the year after, coming out of the youth setup, which I think will start to bear fruit. But that's a medium-term project rather than anything that could be happening this year or next. Yeah,
I think most players could accept being a backup, but not backup to the backup. So if you're third choice, then it's a long way. But it's very early days, obviously, in terms of who Celtic do go on to bring in across the January window. I mean, extremely early. It's November, so couldn't get any earlier. But it's great to see the business being done early, and this should give any new arrivals the biggest chance possible of being successful.
Do you think we'll have both of our strikers still here at the end of January?
No.
Giakoumakis gone?
I think so.
I put it on record. I wrote an article last week, and I've suggested that Giakoumakis might be
the big man,
closely behind Juranovic in exiting.
Yeah.
He looks like a player. We said that last week that he seems to give himself a hard time, and maybe if he just relaxes a wee bit. But it's like he's not happy. Like he's, and I don't think he's got any right not to be happy. If he wants to be the main man, and he's going to convince us all that he's so much better than Kyogo, he guaranteed a start, then he needs to show that in the biggest games possible. Now, he's got good performances, but his all-round game isn't anywhere near what perhaps maybe he thinks that it is. And I think that kind of irks Ange a wee bit when he sees things like that. He's a striker. He's not necessarily going to be the team player, but I think it annoys him a wee bit.
The ball's in Giakoumakis' court. He's been given opportunity, and he's performed relatively well. Got his goal in Europe against Shakhtar, and that's great. But there's other times where he should have been scoring and hasn't. And that's the bottom line. If you come in, get your window, and don't take it, you don't look at Ange, you don't look at the coaches, just have a wee glance in the mirror and your answer's there. But listen, that's another conversation, James, for another show. So defence was the focus for this week, and as always, an interesting chat through. Before we move on to the final section this week, I want to quickly highlight a few of the best reviews we've recently received from some of our listeners. Again, these are a huge help to us and are very much appreciated by everyone here on the team. So first up, San Fran Celtic. James, you'll be familiar with San Fran. Great guy, very supportive, and good chat on Twitter. So he says, top of the table, my favourite podcast. I enjoy every single show. Thank you all. Second review is from the Sizzling Senor. First up, I've got to meet this guy. I need to know the story. I don't know anything of him, don't know the background, but the Sizzling Senor, so there must be a story. Make yourself
known.
So he says, a good listen, good stuff from some genuine Celtic fans. Keep up the good work. And last one for today, Thomas McAleer of the Swindon Shamrock CSC. Very good coverage with smashing details. Keep up the tremendous work. Hail, hail. So thanks to San Fran Celtic, Thomas McAleer, and of course, the Sizzling Senor. And you can view these and all of our reviews at thecelticexchange.com. If you're enjoying what we do and want to provide us with that extra bit of support, then please take the 60 seconds or so to leave us a short review at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.